Or sometimes I'd say, you know, my mom is Taiwanese, and they'd be like, oh, that's amazing. I love Bangkok. I'm like, me too. It's a different country, though. So it was a little...
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Half a Nice Day podcast with your host, Joshua.
And Janine.
And we have a special guest with us here today in the studio. She too has quite the mixture of nationality, everyone. We have the human version of a ChatGPT here. She's a writer, editor, and the winner of the 2023 Emirates Literature Festival. So you know she's going to be judging our vocabulary today.
Yes, she will.
Only quietly in my head.
Yes. You know, you can edit this podcast if you want after and just make a sound. Just put a voiceover.
It's funny, the ChatGPT comment, I used to introduce myself or tell people what I do for a living by saying that I'm a human Grammarly. So now there's an
There
version.
you go.
You know, you're the human version of, you know, that clipboard in Microsoft?
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
Clippy.
Yeah,
Yes.
Clippy, yes. She's also a meditation and boxing coach, so she knows how to make you find your inner peace and at the same time develop your outer strength.
Mm-hmm.
Let's give a warm Half a Nice Day welcome to Yi-Hwa, everybody. Did I say it correctly?
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah.
Thank you
Yi-Hwa.
so much for having me.
Yes, it's so good to have you.
For
So
being here.
So I know you asked me this already, but I just want to tell everyone, like, she was asking us how we got to find her or how we stumbled across her.
Yeah.
And Janine, actually, because I have a list in one of my books where I like write down potential guests and your name was there. And I remember that Janine showing me your profile. I don't know if at the time it was private or not. Did you recently make it private?
It was only recently, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yes. So that's why.
I saw it. I don't know. One of our friends or probably one of our guests. Can't remember if it was, I don't know, Fahad or someone connected to boxing.
Okay.
Do you know Fahad by any chance?
Fahad
Sure.
Al-Balushi.
He's one of, he's half Emirati, half Filipino. He does professional boxing. He fights professionally. So I don't know if I found you through him or one of our friends. And then I sent it to Josh, and the rest is history.
Yeah.
I have you here.
Because we always look at Instagram profiles and we see what's on their bio. So we saw like 4 flags or
Oh, yeah.
I'm like, okay, yeah.
You know
A
what I
potential
saw?
to be on
The gloves with the Lebanese flag. And I'm like, she's Lebanese. And then I sent it to you.
Yes.
And you're like, okay.
So tell us where you're from, because your bio has plus and then multiplied and then division. So you can
Yeah.
explain to us a little bit.
It's a little complicated. I don't know. For a long time, I used to describe myself as a mongrel, but I think hybrid sounds a lot nicer now.
True.
So my mom is from Taiwan. That one's the easy part. I was born in the U.S. and I grew up here in Dubai. Was like for most of my life, and then I went back to the U.S. when I was 16. Came back in my 20s. But my dad. Officially speaking, it's mostly Lebanese, but it's complicated because he was born in what was Palestine at the time.
Okay.
And yeah, I think there's, sort of like mysterious family history, you know, but I think there's some Iraqi blood in there, some other, I have no idea.
Yeah.
A mixture of Arabs, shall we
Nice.
just say.
Yeah.
But like by passport, officially, it was Lebanese.
Okay, so you have a Lebanese passport as well.
I don't know. No.
Okay.
I think my dad at one point had a Jordanian passport as well. So I'm not entirely clear on
Yeah.
the history of it. And my parents had quite a large age gap, a 20-year age difference. And my dad passed away when I was 23. So in Arab culture, as I'm sure you guys know, it's kind of more common, especially for women, to only really get to know their parents as friends when we get a little older.
Yes.
And unfortunately, we had lost my dad by the time I came to that point of my life. So never got to ask him all the juicy questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, beyond that, honestly, it's just, a mixture of Arabs, I shall say.
That's true.
cool.
And I think in the Levant region, that's very common because coming from a Lebanese background as well, my dad is also half Lebanese, half Syrian. So his mom's from Syria, his dad's from Lebanese. But who knows? Like, we might have other families maybe in Jordan or Palestine because
Yeah. I
it
think a lot of
really
people-
was a whole just...
Yeah, a lot of people from
country,
Lebanon
yeah.
seem to have that similar, like, we're Lebanese, but we don't know what else is in there.
Yes.
It's kind of
That's true.
part of the nice thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, by passport, it's an American passport because I was born in New Jersey. Although,
Oh, okay.
Nice.
to me, home in the States is more Boston.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
I was just gonna say you don't have that New Jersey
Yeah.
accent. It's because you only stay there until 2. You came back, then
Yeah.
you went back at 16.
So you grew up in Dubai, but you were born in the U.S.
Yeah, actually, it was Sharjah at first.
Oh, you're
so-
like
a
our
lot of
Proper
Sharjah
old
you're like our
school.
10th guest who's like raised in Sharjah.
Really?
Actually, yeah.
It was the place back in the day. It was actually on the borderline, so where they've changed it completely now, but where the Corniche was on the borderline. So there was one roundabout on the right side of our house where if you drove over that, you were in Ajman. And that is where I
it
grew
was.
up.
So it was far
like the
Sharjah.
end of Sharjah.
Yeah,
Okay,
not even
okay.
closer to Dubai.
Yeah.
Nice.
So you studied in Sharjah as well?
So I lived there until I was, I don't even remember what age, to be honest, but it was when I was in year 9 of school that I started going to school in Dubai. Before
Okay.
that, I was in the International School of Shoifat in Sharjah.
Yes.
And then
Okay.
I moved over to Dubai College from year 9 onwards.
Okay.
That's so close to my school. Shoifat was like on the other side of the street. My school's Far Eastern Private School. It's a
Okay.
Filipino school. So we're on the other side. And then we would just look over the street and we'd be like, that's where all the rich kids go. The Shoifat.
That's where all the Lebanese kids go.
the Lebanese
That's
kids.
where all the
go.
kids who take
That's
tons of
true.
exams go.
Yeah.
It's like non-stop exams.
That's true. You know what I hate? Exams.
Who likes exams, first of all? So that's the thing.
That never helped us.
Yeah.
Maybe it did with
Yeah.
the pressure, but not so much. So how was growing up in Sharjah and then going to Dubai and then going back to the US? Like, how was that transition and being in your teens?
How, in what sense?
How was it like being here at, was it what, early 2000s
Like
when
a
you
more of a
moved?
culture
Like,
shock, I guess.
Yeah,
Like
like, how
Sharjah's
did
like
you-
quite conservative, at least till this date as
Yeah.
well.
Well, you guys flatter me. Apparently, you think I'm younger than I am because it was the 90s, not the 2000s.
So how was it moving in the 90s?
Yeah, I am. I'm
and-
turning
yeah.
38 this year. So
Okay.
yeah, when I was growing up in Sharjah, it was the 90s. And
Okay.
the 90s, Sharjah was glorious. I don't know. I loved it. It was an awesome place to be. I kind of sometimes describe it to sort of more new to the UAE people as what Ras Al Khaimah feels like nowadays. It has that same vibe for me where
Right.
it's not a small town. It has a little bit of that energy, but it's, you know, it's got the best of both worlds in that sense, you know?
Right.
But then, yeah, it started to get a lot stricter by the time we had moved to Dubai, or like about a year
Okay.
before.
Oh, so
that.
it wasn't
It started.
strict. Okay.
Yeah, at the end of my high school years,
Okay.
or like sort of the latter half of middle school. I don't remember
Right.
the year exactly,
Yeah.
but it was definitely when I was a little older. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's
and
quite different when I was growing up.
we spoke about this in a little bit on one of our earlier podcasts, but Sharjah was really the place to be back
Yeah.
in those days.
Yeah.
Like I remember like going there as a child as well, just enjoying it with my parents. Like if we wanted to go for dinner, we would find somewhere in Sharjah
Yeah,
to go.
it
Yeah.
was in
So I
Sharjah.
think things have changed a
Yeah.
little bit, especially with the traffic. It's unbearable. So I don't think like
Yeah,
a lot of people wouldn't choose to go to Sharjah as to
I still
spend.
have a lot of friends who live in Sharjah now,
Okay.
and that they commute all the way to
Oh,
Dubai,
gosh,
you know,
yeah.
for work. Which, admittedly, I always hear like it's a crazy long drive.
Yes.
So I don't know what it's like to live there now, obviously, but back then, I do know that when we were growing up, there was such a great sense of community, and I loved that about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But nowadays, like Sharjah still has a lot of amazing things. I mean, like I said, I don't live there, so I don't know the nooks and crannies of like living in a certain neighborhood. But
Yeah.
there's so much amazing art offering in the
Yes.
city at the moment, you know,
Yes.
and they've got that incredible library as well.
Yes.
The House of Wisdom. So
Yes.
yeah, a lot.
And they had an art fair, I think like 2 or 3 years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
They always have something that is sort of connected to the whole like cultural, because I feel like
Yeah.
Dubai is always more so like new and modern, but then if you really want to have that
Like soak in the traditional style
traditional
of things. Yeah.
cultural experience, like I think Sharjah is one of the places
Yeah.
to go. Yeah.
Yeah.
With all that, they have the museums as well. They have one of the biggest
The biggest and best university is there. Yeah.
Yeah. That whole strip
Yeah.
of like
Near
it's quite
if I'm not
cool.
mistaken, it's near the Sharjah airport.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I haven't been in Sharjah airport for a while. Yeah.
I travel budget, so I'm always there.
So 16, you moved to New Jersey or Boston.
So I went to high school. We moved to Dubai because my mom got really tired of doing the school run, or
Yeah.
with the school bus, it was such a long drive, and the traffic started getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you guys remember, but back then, Global Village was not where it is now.
Yes.
And so the traffic, I mean, it's great that it was so popular, but the traffic, because of the location where it was, it made those drives back to Sharjah
Yes.
just wild. And I
Yes.
remember in those days, we always used to joke that like Garhoud Bridge, it's immense because you've got all these lanes and every single one of them is still full. So we eventually had to move to Dubai.
Right.
And then, yeah, I actually finished high school when I was 16. So that's when I moved back to the States because I got into college already.
Okay.
Yeah. And were you alone, or did your mom like go with you to the States, or?
I mean, my parents came to drop me off and like help me, you know, sort of buy my bed sheets and stuff.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
to get
yeah.
you settled into your dorm room and everything. But no, it was alone. I was super excited.
Nice.
I think, well, I'm the youngest of 4 children, so
Okay.
it was
You're
that
the
time
last
of my
one.
life. Yeah, I was like, finally, my independence.
Yes.
I get to be me, not someone's sister. You know, and so that was really exciting for me.
Yeah, that's true. I think being either the middle child or the youngest child, it's always, oh yeah, so and so's sister or so and so's brother.
Yeah.
And you're like, yeah,
I have a name.
yeah, my name is.
But like growing up in so from there you moved to the US. Were you experienced like this is so different from Dubai? Like did you think like, okay, like because there like especially like a college life, you see the fraternity systems and the sororities and then the college partying.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sort of a weird one for me to answer because I know this sounds like, it makes me sound like such a knob, but it just sounds sort of like a bad cliche of like, I'm not like the others. And I really don't mean it that way at all, but I've sort of never been. Did you guys ever watch that show, The In-Betweeners?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so not that version of it, but I guess I was an in-betweener in that sense where I always like being part of different social groups, but I kind of very much always have been someone who likes to do my own thing.
Okay.
So with that in mind, I never was appealed by the idea of like joining a sorority or anything like that. It just wasn't my vibe. So I always wanted to just sort of just find my own way, man, dipping into all the different social circles and things like that. And the university that I chose has an amazing, huge international population of the student body. So I thought that was another huge part of the appeal for me. It got to meet people from everywhere. Nice. So yeah, it was very international, and I loved that about it.
Would you have a lot of people asking you like, where are you from, and then you have to explain your whole family history?
Like you got 5 minutes?
Well, it was funny because back then, I mean, even when you said I grew up in Dubai or the UAE, you would always have to say Dubai because people didn't know the UAE at the time. Yes. My sister, who had gone to uni in the States a couple of years before me as well, a different uni, and people used to always tell her like, oh, Hawaii, that's so cool, and she's like, no, I didn't say Hawaii, I said Dubai. And I got a couple of times, oh, what was it like growing up in India? I'm like, well, I wouldn't know because it's a different country. Or sometimes I'd say, my mom is Taiwanese, and they'd be like, oh, that's amazing, I love Bangkok. I'm like, me too, it's a different country though. So it was a little different at the time. And then I just remember there was this sudden shift where suddenly in the media Dubai became cool. And in many ways, I feel like the Burj Al Arab is one of the things we have to thank for that, because suddenly everyone's like, wait, that's the country with like the 7-star hotel. And it was featured on Gossip Girl. And suddenly people knew what I was talking about when I said where I had grown up. So
that's true.
Okay.
Yeah,
is it the hotel with the gold interior? You're like, yep.
Yeah.
Is it the one with the highest or the tallest building? Yes,
I remember. Do you guys remember ICQ?
No.
It was like, maybe it's like sort of just a little bit
before
your generation. Yeah, it was this chat thing. When the internet was still kind of new. And I remember I was in 6th or 7th grade. And of course, nowadays we would never we would tell kids, be careful and don't chat to random strangers on the internet.
We used to,
back
actually.
Then, we didn't know. And I just remember you'd be speaking to these random people on ICQ. And I remember someone, I think they were from Australia. And it blows my mind now because the world has become so globalized that you wouldn't dream of most people thinking this. But back then someone said, do you guys have electricity? And I'm like, I'm talking to you on the internet. Like, do you think that my parents are outside rubbing rocks together to get a spark? Yes, we have the internet. And to think of how it went from that was the perception of where is this mysterious place you come from to just within less than a decade later, suddenly it was, oh, are you from that place where like, does everyone drive Lamborghinis and everyone lives in gold-plated houses? And I'm like, wow, what a dramatic shift.
Right?
So true. So true. Because like even I remember like back in the day when I used to go back to Philippines as a child and then would say Dubai, it was like, oh, so they thought Saudi Arabia because every like Filipino worker who leaves Philippines would go straight to Saudi Arabia. So when people started saying Dubai like in the middle of nowhere, and then suddenly like overnight basically people started knowing about where UAE was, it really changed everything.
Yeah. It's funny to me you say that because I can't remember if it was 5 or 6 years ago. I met someone, not even a friend, at a friend's wedding. And I was saying I'm from Dubai. And he looks me straight in the eye and he asked me, so do you guys have camels? Like, do you go around with camels? And I thought he was joking, but he was genuinely like asking that question. I'm like, I wonder, like, what does he think about Dubai now, as you said, because everyone knows what Dubai is already. Yeah. Everyone knows it's the place to be, and everyone wants to come to Dubai.
Yeah,
because it's like the
it's
place.
Really amazing when you think about it. And I think it's like sort of twofold. One of it is, sort of the growth of the internet. Nowadays, we know about like small countries that would have been as foreign to us, that we maybe never experienced or had a peek into the culture of. You can see that because of like the globalization of the world and the internet and everything, but also because the UAE has really done an incredible job of like putting this country on the map.
That's true.
I mean, yeah, even, I mean, I know this will come up later because I know we're going to talk about it, but even things like the Literature Festival, I mean, I might get a little emo when we talk about that later, but it's a big deal for someone like a kid who grew up here. And I used to grow up looking through magazines that, special order that you'd get from the States. And, I remember like we would fill out those physical cards that you'd write on a little note and beg my parents for the pocket money, where I would post it and try to get certain products like lip smackers from the States, because they didn't have them here.
Yes.
To now, everything you want is at your fingertips here.
Yes.
And back then, we were just this question mark that so many people didn't know about. And now it's the kind of place where there's a certain legitimacy to the kind of accolades that you can receive here. So to me, it was this little kid growing up here, the idea of wanting to become a magazine editor or an author, or so many of the things I've done in my adult life, they felt amazing. Like I wanted to dream about them, but they felt like somebody else's dreams. And it was this idea that I would love to do something like that, but my version of it, because someone like me, who looks like me, who grew up here, would probably never be able to achieve that. And now, when you achieve something like that, the recognition that you get here is something that people elsewhere would also maybe vie for. So it's really amazing, and I treasure it deeply.
Yeah, because growing up here, you wouldn't think of writing as a job. Like you would think, okay, the usual job is either an engineer
doctor,
or a doctor, an architect, an IT, someone who works at the office. Those are the typical jobs that our parents would talk about, or the friends of our parents would talk about. And doing something that is art driven is not really something that we would.
For sure. And it was the same for me. I think a lot of it is culture. Like my parents always had a huge appreciation for culture and the arts, but it was something that you would appreciate as opposed to maybe consider a full-blown career in. So I, again, never dreamed it was possible. They didn't mean any harm. It is just a huge part of both like East Asian and Arab culture.
Yes.
That whole cliche. I know it, like all my Indian friends say it's the same thing in India, same in Pakistan. And I actually read this really interesting thing online the other day where someone described it as it's not just from those cultures or those countries. It's also typically children of immigrants when you think of it from the U.S. perspective.
True. Right,
And it makes sense because if you think about from that perspective, I had never really seen it that way because, you don't really think of expats in the same like lifestyle. I know it sounds strange because it's the idea of someone leaving and settling somewhere else, but the idea of an expat is often glamorized. Immigrant is not something that's typically glamorized. And the way they described it was if your parents sacrificed everything to come to this country to build a better life for you, their goal would be for you to become as educated as possible, to get the best job that you could and make enough money so that you never have to struggle like they did when they sacrificed everything for you.
That's true.
So it makes sense that they would want to push for those, you know, as opposed to the more, I guess, high risk things like jobs in the arts.
Yes. It is high risk. I mean, not anymore now because we see these amazing artists being recognized. But back in the days, our parents would never thought someone who would either write or, I don't know, become a full-time YouTuber or a content creator would actually earn as much as or even more as a doctor or an architect or an engineer.
Like we were just talking about that Ryan Kid reviews on YouTube.
Yes.
He's like a kid who's maybe is he a billionaire or a multi-millionaire?
I think millionaire, I think millionaire.
And especially when they're considered an expat or an immigrant, they left their country in pursuit of, like the American dream is an example, and then they see their kid
a better life.
And then they work hard, they like take very odd jobs, then they see their kids sitting in front of a camera and just talking about something. Of course it might like piss them off to some extent, but they really don't know like there's multitudes of ways of making money nowadays.
And there's something almost bittersweet about that because I think on the one hand it's incredible that all these new opportunities have opened up. I like the fact that we don't live in a world where you have to be boxed in by these like sort of standard paths, and I love that. It's also the fact that a lot of these careers or vocations, they were not as open. The world has changed. They weren't as open to people who are outside of a certain subset before.
Right.
And so the world is now growing. There's more opportunities from people of different backgrounds everywhere, and all of that's wonderful. But the other sort of bittersweet aspect is that I think, at least it took me until I had reached adulthood to finally understand this about my parents. We all have that moment where you're a teenager and you're just like, I hate my parents. They don't understand me. And slam the door. But when you grow up, you realize just how much you relate to the things that your parents had taught you when you were growing up and what they went through, because you find yourself either in their shoes or in completely different shoes. And imagining how they would have felt. And so what I mean in this particular instance is that, for example, with my mom, I used to get so frustrated with her when I was younger because she wouldn't understand me. And now that I'm older, I have so much more respect for her because it can't be easy to choose to raise your children with a huge element of culture that is so different to your own.
Yeah.
It's almost like a sacrifice. It's quite
Yes.
selfless because if they chose to raise you in the exact same culture they did, it's easier for them to relate to you.
Yeah.
And by introducing to a
Yes.
whole new world, they run the risk of not being able to relate to their kid as much as they would have otherwise, but they do it for you.
Yeah.
And it's something, you know, like it's human nature for us to be afraid of that which we don't know.
Yes.
And so I know that it's quite intimidating for, like, or at some point she had admitted this to me once, where it's quite intimidating to her sometimes when she sees me or my siblings off doing things that she doesn't necessarily, like, I don't want to say understand, she gets it, but you know, that it wasn't part of her world.
Yes.
But she's still so proud. It just takes them a little time to reconcile because it's so different.
Yeah.
So true.
But that's
So-
so good of your mom to, even if she was scared, to set that feeling aside and be like,
Yeah,
okay,
for
it's a new
sure.
generation. I have to let my kids
Yeah.
do what they believe in. And that's amazing
Yeah.
because, again, not everyone from their generation would think that way.
Yeah.
And I think now our generation are the ones who are starting to change that narrative and be like, okay, we can't do that
sure.
anymore, because you can't implement that with Gen Zs anymore. Imagine telling
Yeah,
Gen
that's-
Zs you can't do that. It's totally different. But like, good on your mom for doing
Yeah.
that.
I mean, it
and-
took us a while to get there,
Yeah.
admittedly. When I told them when I was at uni, I studied literature and economics. That was the deal. I told them I wanted to go to art school at first, and they looked at me and like sort of laughed, and they said, you can if you want to, but then you're going to pay for college yourself.
Oh,
and I
okay.
mean,
Yeah.
that sounds so spoiled to me. I'm so grateful that my parents helped to fund my education, but at the
Yes.
same time, I'm super grateful for that. But then it's like I was a few months out from finishing high school, and I just thought, oh God, okay, I'm just going to go with it. And so I studied that, and I studied literature. Didn't even study English lit. I studied French literature
Oh, okay.
because, well, the argument was my parents were like, well, you already speak English. Why do you need to go study English lit? What career are you going to make from that? At least if it was French lit, then I could still study literature, but I could prove to them it's in another language, so I'm becoming more intellectual.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that was
yeah.
sort of my argument, like
Yes.
how I justified it at the
Yes.
time. And the goal was to become a lawyer. So my first job out of college was working as a paralegal for a couple of years.
What?
And, yeah, and I mean, I think I would have enjoyed a career in that, but there was something in me that was like, I just want to do something creative. So I got a side hustle as an intern at Yelp, actually, which at the time was a
Okay.
brand new startup that my friend's boyfriend had started in San Francisco. And they
What?
needed to open up. Yeah, it was crazy. It was so small at the time. And she just goes, hey, listen, so he started this thing and we're trying to open up the Boston division. You want to be my intern? I'm like, yeah, sure. So I got a crash course in marketing and PR and everything from there. And I was working mad hours. Like my day job at the law firm during the day. I worked at Yelp on the weekends. I was like selling paintings in the evening. And that was when I kind of got addicted to the idea that, you know what, like you meet amazing people who give you opportunities and you realize, I can do this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, screw it. Let me just go try it and see. And it felt so, I know this sounds so cheesy, but like when I was exploring these different avenues, I had never felt more me. And that's when I realized, you know what, I think I'm just going to do it. I want to live my life like this.
Yeah.
And then my dad got sick. And so at the time I had been planning to go to uni and get my master's degree in comms, either in France or in London. And then I got this phone call saying that my dad had had a heart attack. The doctor said he would probably have 2 years left. And I quit my job almost immediately and moved back to Dubai. And I'm so glad that I did, because it wasn't 2 years. We had about 6 months. I've never regretted it. It was like, you know, something in my gut told me that.
Yeah.
And this job opened up for an opportunity at a newspaper, which was actually like technically in Sharjah, but on the borderline that's closer to Dubai. And the job was as like a copy editor. And it was so awkward because I was the only woman on the team. And I was the youngest.
Of course.
I had
yeah.
a brilliant deputy editor, Ramesh. Like he was wonderful, like a great guy to work with, and he really helped give me the confidence that I needed, and especially in like sort of my first UAE job then. But it was hard because, you know, I had to deal with people not taking you seriously and
Yes.
stuff like that. And then
Yeah,
after
yeah.
that, I realized, no, this is what I want to do. I know that this is what I want to do. I don't know if maybe my dad passing away had something to do with it, but my parents, I never forget when I told them I want to be a writer. I'd like to be a journalist. And then they just looked at me and they went, oh, God, you're going to be poor for the rest of your life. And I'm like,
you're never going to move out of our place.
And I was like, well, I'll be poor, but I'll be happy, you know?
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of both. I mean, I probably should have been a bit more practical, like when I was younger, but this idea of like this, you know, I'm going to be the starving artist living la vie bohème and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
the idea was that I just kind of knew in that moment that if I didn't do, as cheesy as it sounds, what my heart really wanted, I could never be happy.
Yeah.
And I couldn't live like that. That's kind of been sort of an ongoing theme in my life. When your gut is telling you something, you have to follow it.
Yeah.
Because you can't lie to yourself. And being authentic in the way you live your life, whether it's your job, your relationships, whatever you do, it's always been super important to me. So I just thought, okay, well, let me give this a shot. If I fail, I fail.
Yeah.
So I started applying to every job I could think of in media, magazines, editorial, and I was determined to see if I could give this a go. And I thought, if I fail, I fail, but at least I know I gave it a shot. And I had this interview with this amazing woman called Lena, who to this day is one of my greatest mentors. She's one of my greatest friends. And we had this great interview where we just talked for ages. And at the end of it, she said to me, you and I were kindred spirits. And I've never forgotten that. And we truly were. I think we had even talked about like Harry Potter and bonding over our love for that during
Harry Potter
huge Harry
fan.
Potter.
She'll show you her Harry Potter shelf at the end of this
Okay,
episode.
yes, please. I
Her
would love
shrine.
to see that. Well, the thing is, but it's amazing how certain stories can make you click and bond with someone,
Yeah.
you know?
Yes.
And yeah, so she's amazing. And it got me into that company. And, you know, we ended up working there for 7 or 8 years. And
Oh, wow.
while I was there, yeah, I hustled. It's not easy working in media. But at the time, I like to say that I caught like the tail end of the golden years of it, because it's changed so much since then. And it was sad for me when all these years later, I had finally made it to being the editor-in-chief of a magazine, working with, and I had launched it. It was Women's Health. And it was a huge moment for
Wow.
me because I'll never forget, like when I went for the training in New York, and when I went to, on future trips, I went to like a CVS or something, and I picked it up and I thought, that's my name in the US version of Women's Health and the list of international editors. And I've had so many of those pinch me moments. But I worked really hard to get them. And it's sort of strange. It's strange for me to think of like the way I communicate my emotions about this, because I don't mean to sound ungrateful.
Yeah.
But it does bother me when people say things like, oh, you're so lucky, and that's all they say. Because it's not usually luck. And I don't just mean me. I mean, like most people, it's a combination of luck and hard work.
Yeah.
Because
100%.
if you don't have
Yeah.
the discipline, you're never going to get there. But having said that, it is also sometimes the luck comes from having an opportunity show up and being ready to go and take it and give it your all.
Yes.
Or meeting an amazing person who inspires you and enables you to think, I can do this.
Yes,
You know, and
that's
they're
true.
willing to teach you. And so for me, the luck has come in the form of these incredible people. I mean, I've met some of my best friends for life while working at the magazine.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because I can imagine having an opportunity present itself to you, as you said, the luck part, but then you're not ready. You're not ready to hustle. You're not ready to work for it. Then eventually it'll just falter. So you can imagine like your friend's boyfriend who was starting Yelp at that time said, you know, you want to intern for me? And you're like, actually, no, because I'm tired. I'm doing this job at the, you know, as a paralegal. I'm not sleeping. If you had said no to that, then, you know, it
Yeah.
wouldn't have trickled down to you coming back here, you
Yeah.
getting, so it's sort of, yes, a combination of luck or whatever people would call it, but it's also you like really pushing yourself as hard as you can.
Yeah, the luck
to
is
get
definitely
it.
in those
Yeah.
doors opening.
Yes.
But also, I mean, that's not to say, I don't think that means someone should always be like, you know, pushing themselves to
Pushing.
take every single opportunity. It's
Yeah.
more about learning to sort of get in tune with yourself, to understand when the door has been opened for something that you might really want. And then, so like if we fast forward way down the line, I mean, you know, so you guys are aware that I'm a sound healing therapist. I'm a meditation and mindfulness teacher as well. And that aspect of my life is also really important to me. And I think it started quite early on. I'll never forget my very first experience with meditation was actually, it was in a room at school, and I think I was in like year 6 or 7 or something, maybe a little older.
That's fairly young.
I had a gym teacher who had led this meditation session, and I don't even remember her name. And to this day, whoever she is, thank you, because I remember walking out of that experience thinking, whoa, what was that? That was amazing. And it's not like I then went on and studied everything about meditation. I didn't completely understand it at the time, but I knew it was powerful. And I think it really sort of hit home for me, this idea that you have to follow your gut.
Yes.
And so, like I said, the fast forward, it's this idea that I think nowadays wellness culture has become so pervasive. It almost worries me to an extent, because I love the fact that more people around the world are getting into holistic living and, you know, all of this stuff. It's great. But there is a very fine line where it could be dangerous because it's irresponsible. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this term called spiritual bypassing. But
No.
so it basically is the idea that you use your spirituality or like sort of holistic healing and all that stuff as a vehicle for avoiding what you really need to deal with.
Right. Yeah.
And so if we were to talk about the idea of these doors opening, just coming back to that subject, manifestation is a big one.
Yeah.
So I think the idea being that if you were to do sort of spiritual bypassing, you would, to use manifestation in that way, you would say, oh, I'm just going to manifest it. I'm going to have this. I'll just manifest it.
Yeah.
You don't just sit there and go, I want the thing to happen, then you manifest. It's like, you know, as much as I would love to believe in Harry Potter, magic in that sense is not real.
That's
the
true.
manifestation is the science of the law of attraction. If you think about the fact that if you truly want something and you have had that little conversation with yourself and I want it with everything I have, your body language is going to change. The way you communicate with the world's going to change. Everything about the way you interact with the people, your surroundings is going to change, which will then open up those opportunities for you. And that is what you manifest, those doors opening. So for example, in that instance, you know, and of course I wasn't aware of it at the time, but by deciding I want this and I really, really want it, and I absolutely was certain of that, and I put my all into sending out all those applications. And when I met with Lena that day for that interview way back then, I expressed it so truly, and that enabled us to connect more authentically. I think that is how you manifest, so to speak, because that door is open. But if you simply just have this idea that, oh, I'm going to put it out there, but you're not willing to then step through that door and take that opportunity, you're not going to have the result, if that makes sense.
I think the definition of manifestation is sort of being distorted, as you mentioned, because people use it as an easy route to be like, okay, I've manifested. I mean, there are some people who say, oh, I've really manifested it, and I don't know, by chance it happened, but it doesn't happen all the time. And we were just talking about this in the previous podcast, the seven habits of highly effective people, where he says like manifestation is actually like a goal or a vision that you write for yourself and you work towards it. It's not about, I've written it in my manifestation board and
it'll just appear.
It's like I want to be successful one day and rich, and then, you know, just keep on like joining lotteries and stuff, but they're not actually taking that step towards like obtaining that by themselves. Like it also happens a little bit in like religion, I want to say, where they're like, oh, I'm going to pray that, you know, that I'm going to have this best job, but at the same time I don't even apply for anything. So it really you need to put some action forward. Exactly.
Well. Yeah, for sure. And it is the energy that you're putting out there with everything that you do. So I think that's sort of what manifesting kind of becomes. But yeah, as you said, it becomes distorted. And there's so many aspects of that in modern wellness culture that it's funny. I have this strange fascination with cults. Watch so many documentaries about them. And you'll see like sort of that theme in a lot of the novels that I'm trying to write at the moment. But it's because of this idea that when we forget to become in tune with ourselves, I think one of the things I find fascinating about that is a lot of the time when you look at people who end up being swallowed into something like that, you think, how could they? Because these are intelligent, educated people who do seem to think for themselves. It's because it is so easy to get swept up in it because it happens piece by piece over time. And so I think for me, when it comes to this idea of like, what is mindfulness or meditation, or it's just remembering to always come back to what's in here and like giving yourself a reality check, so to speak, you know, and reminding yourself of this is my path, this is who I am, and I can't forget those things. And then you make your decisions from there. When
you said earlier that you listen to your gut, I think it's also very important to preface that you have to listen to your gut when you are actually in tune with yourself. Because if you're not, and you think it's, you know, your gut, or you think it's something else, maybe it's not. Maybe it's just your mind like trying to be swept away. As
that's why they say never make decisions when you're angry or in a place of, you know, when you're in a low place, basically. Never
like your emotions are not stable.
Never do grocery shopping when you're hungry, you know, all these things, because at the same time the state of your body and mind might be completely
Yeah.
different. So
Well,
you
it's-
need to really take a step back, understand the risks if you really want to pursue it, and
Because
then
then
go for
you're
it.
not making the decision. Your emotions of that
Yes.
moment are making the
Yes.
decision.
Yes, true.
So, yeah.
So it's a good reminder that yes, listen to your gut when you know that you're actually in
Yeah.
tune, when you have meditated, when you have taken the time to actually think of all of the risks, when you have, just take a breather instead of just going,
Yeah.
as you said, and
Yeah.
just pushing yourself to
I have this little
limit.
like sort of ritual that I like to do when I really can't make my mind up about something, and I am a super overthinker.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have like a mild form of OCD. Genuinely, like it's and it when I realize that, I'm like, oh, it all makes sense because people with that are really good at like attention to detail. No wonder now my career makes sense.
Right.
But it also comes with like a lot of ruminating thoughts as well. So
Okay.
you have to know when to sort of pull yourself back.
Yes.
But anyway, when I struggle to make a decision, sometimes I'll write down my list of pros and cons and all of the things
Okay.
I've overthought, and so it's there. So my
Yeah.
brain has all of that information, and then I'll look at it, I'll think about it, and then I'll rip it up and throw it away and sleep on it.
Yeah.
And then whatever your gut tells you in the next like 3 days, week, whatever, that's because your mind has all the information already.
True.
Yes.
And then
Yeah.
you can let everything else settle into place and then come to what you really want.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas it's not just like, oh, but this is it. Because you can also get so like a little too much in your head.
That's true. But I also like that you write it down. I myself write pros and cons list all the time, especially if I'm trying to decide for something that's quite big or something that's a little bit life-changing. To me, there's something about writing it down and letting your brain process, okay, this is the pros list, this is the cons list. And similar to journalism, like there's just something about writing your thoughts,
Yeah.
writing whatever's in your head down that makes it more, I don't know, understandable for
Yeah.
your head that, okay, this is reality.
For
And it's not
sure.
just everything.
Yeah,
in
you
your
Well,
can-
head
there's
as
been
well.
so much
Yeah.
research done on the power of like journaling.
Yeah.
It's honestly, it's a huge thing. There's a lot of science behind the benefits of it. So I definitely believe in that.
So I just wanted to backtrack a little bit. What was that moment that made you think writing is what I want to do in the future? Like, what was that?
It's sort of weird. I had a feeling that you were going to ask me that question. Like I literally thought of this like a couple of days ago. And the answer is honestly, there was not one like aha eureka moment. It was more like little bits and pieces over time, and then you kind of collectively realize, oh, I'm already there, and you don't realize that I've already been doing all the things. You can't avoid it, I've been sitting there going, am I a writer? Can I be a writer? And then you kind of realize, oh, I've already been doing all the things that are taking me there anyway. And then you realize that there is this force that it's like, okay, well, it's unstoppable. I might as well roll with it, in that
Right.
sense.
Okay.
Because it's not like I woke up one day and just thought, okay, boom, I'm going to be a writer. But then when you look back over your life and you realize it was always seeping out in certain little ways. Like when I was in college, I should have charged for it. I never really thought about it. But my friends would always come to me with their papers, and I would help them edit and correct their papers and whatever. And I was editing even from way back then, and I was the person people would go to as their human Grammarly even back then.
Yeah.
And when I was in, I think it was year 9, my English teacher, Mr. Donovan, he had come up to me one day from this horrific it was a horror story, like a horror story that I had written. And I was so nervous when I handed it in because I thought, oh God, like what's someone going to think of me when they read this? It's a horror story, but it's pretty messed up. And he had like asked me to stay after class, and I thought I was going to get told off.
Oh, okay.
And you were overthinking it
I
already.
know, exactly. I'm like,
my mom
oh,
gonna have to
what
come?
have I done? Yeah, I know. It's
Why
like
is the
your-
psychologist here?
Seriously, your child has some issues. And exactly. And actually, he just said, have you ever thought about, taking your writing more seriously because you have a gift for this? And it was the first person in my life who ever made me realize, oh, I'm good at this. And it's funny, I had seen him a few years ago. We had had one too many wines, I think. And I told him that, by the way, I don't know, I hadn't spoken to him since school, but like, I don't know how to say this, but I'm just going to come out with the cheese. Like, thank you for inspiring me. I know, like, it's an amazing thing. They must see hundreds of students come through the schools for all those years. But like, thank you, Mr. Donovan, because that very first comment, I don't think I even realized at the time what a huge impact it had planted a seed for me.
Yeah.
Yes.
And when I told him, I've started writing my first novel, and he, like, both of us had like a moment of teariness. So yeah.
Yes. I think as a child, it's very important that someone, and I'm sure you took his advice or what his comment to your heart because he's a professional. He's
Yeah.
not just a friend who's like, oh, you're good at editing.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks for editing my paper. You're actually good at this. No, it's actually a professional.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
teacher who teaches writing.
it's
told you that you're good at it.
It's funny that you say that, because so at this year's literature festival, I went to a talk by Jeffrey Archer.
Jeffrey Archer.
Yeah, he's amazing.
Yeah.
He's hilarious, by the way. He's like a real showman. Like if you ever get a chance to go to a talk by him, like he's almost like he's basically a comedian. He's brilliant. He had the entire audience like in stitches. But loads of useful information. And I love the fact that at the end he got quite emotional when he talked about what he's achieved so far, like to this day, even after everything. But I had asked him a question as part of the talk, like, you know, from the audience. And when I asked him for some advice on like, how do you know when you're ready? And he said, give it to someone to read, but someone that you don't know. Do not give it to your friends. They're going to tell you you're great. They will lie.
Yes.
Don't give it to your partner. They'll tell you you're great. They will lie. Do not give it to your kids if you have them. They will lie. Because people that you know, like, it's wonderful, and you need that support. Those people to believe in you. But sometimes it's almost like the way that, you know, when people go to the hairdresser and they spill all of their gossip because it's someone impartial.
Yes.
It's that same vibe almost, for that validation.
Yeah, I think a lot of hairdressers would actually
like
have
really
to write a book.
Yeah, the secrets that they must have.
Or like taxi drivers, you know, like all these, you just make some
like
small talk and you end up like, yo, I need to see you again.
Yeah, exactly. Therapist, thank you for your time.
Right.
Yeah, but that must have been amazing. And so how did you go from that to where you are now, like an award-winning writer? That's amazing.
So I'm not yet published. I'm still finishing my novels, and I'm going to start querying agents this year. It's a pretty long process, to be honest. And, you know, I've learned so much along the way. The fellowship that I won last year, it's been like, there are no words to describe how grateful I am for it, because it's the community, it's the things I've learned, and to have this group of fellow writers, it's been unbelievable. I had a little taste of that even before the fellowship. I have a friend called Stacy who's incredible, and she's also a double award winner.
Wow.
And she is writing a book, and we used to meet up for these like sort of coffee dates and writing dates. And she's the one who encouraged me to apply. I wouldn't have had the confidence until she just said, "Oh, just go for it, Yi-Hwa."
Right.
You know, and I really admire her. And so, you know, when she told me just go for it, I just thought, okay, fine, I will. But it's crazy how no matter how many things you might have achieved in your career as a writer, as a journalist, a book is a whole different ballgame. You know, it's so different, and it's such a long journey. It's something that I had always wanted to do, but again, I never dreamed that I could become a traditionally published author.
Yeah.
So if anyone has ever seen photos of me at either of those award ceremonies, I have a full-on like ugly cry, like that Dawson's Creek meme, because you like I told myself, like, if anything happens, I'm gonna play it cool, and then of course absolutely did not happen.
As soon as
Because
you
you
jump
see
on
your
that
years
stage.
of hard work
But
come out.
it's very emotional, you know, and it's because you still don't believe that level of achievement is possible. And I will probably ugly cry again on the day that I sign with an agent, on the day I hold my first book with my hands, you know, and all those things. But it's a very long journey, and I think one of the things that's hard, that perhaps can cause a barrier for a lot of people, is lack of access to the knowledge that you need to be able to succeed in an industry like that.
Right.
Which is something that the Lit Foundation with this fellowship is trying to do, which is really incredible.
Oh, that's great.
There's never been anything like it in this region. And so I think what this is going to do for future writers is incredible.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to write it. And then 1 year after, I think, it was in 2018, I had left the job I was in at the time. And it was the first time, like, ever that I had been without a day job for a while. And I was freelancing, and I was in a long distance relationship. So I went to stay with my partner in South Africa for a few months. We traveled to Brazil and went to a spiritual retreat where we did some like plant medicine with some shamans. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. It was
like,
legal
and,
there.
ayahuasca and everything.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just for the record, it was legal in the country that we did it. Right?
Yes.
But I mean, it was an incredible experience, and I think it almost broke me open. It was the year after I had done this boxing competition where I would wake up every day before work and get punched in the face at 5:30 a.m., go to work, come back to the gym, start training again.
Yeah.
And I realized that I had put myself through those situations because I wanted to like push myself to the max to find out, when I'm ripped raw, who am I? What do I
Right.
want?
Your breaking point.
Yeah. And I, again, like didn't realize I was doing it until I was already doing it. But then after that trip, I just sat there and I just thought, what do I truly want to achieve with my life? I've always wanted to write this book. And I know it sounds ridiculous to say it this way, but I had this like spiritual moment where like the spirit of Mother Earth showed me this celestial library. And I know it sounds insane, but it was this, almost like, have you guys ever read the book, The Midnight Library?
No.
it's an amazing book. And I mean, he's never officially said it, the writer, Matt Haig, but it's loosely based on the idea of the Akashic Records, from what I understand. Anyway, he's never stated that. And it's this idea that there's this sort of like, I don't know, interdimensional library that contains all the different stories of your lives in there. So as I was in this like spiritual experience, I'm looking at all these books and I'm like, what are these? And this voice that was not the voice in my head, I know that voice, it was a different one. And it just said, listen, like, you're a storyteller. That is this, like, each life is like a game. And your role in this one, you're a storyteller. So what are you waiting for? Go tell your stories. And I had always I had started writing that book beforehand in bits and pieces, but never really sat down to take it seriously. And after that, when we got back to South Africa, after like flying back from Brazil, I just sat in his mom's kitchen and I just typed and typed and typed and typed. And suddenly before I knew it, I had 35,000 words and I'm like, okay, I'm writing this book.
That's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just, it's sort of like, I mean, I don't want to say like, you know, some spiritual deity told me to do it. It's not like that. I mean, but I mean, I'm a realist, yet at the same time, I'm very spiritual. I know it's a strange combination.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think it was just that I needed that push to believe that I could do it.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. I have the utmost respect for writers because I used to write when I was in college, more so like news journalism. But it's very difficult. Like at some points, like how do you tackle a writer's block, for example?
Can I also have a follow-up question to what she said?
Sure.
So I know in this day and age with like technology, like I just mentioned like ChatGPT, you mentioned Grammarly.
Yeah.
Is your job, like I don't want to say your job, but is it easier now if someone did want to start becoming like a journalist or an author? Because of all these now tools that are there, like it can even complete a sentence if you wanted it to. Okay. So how do you feel your career or what you want to do is being affected by everything now?
I don't know who to answer first.
No, you can. She asked first, and it's
we'll
Women's Day, so
okay. Yeah, sorry.
So how do you tackle, and have you ever experienced a writer's block?
Yeah, it's funny. Like in my group of like writer friends, we're always like, kind of getting frustrated about it, and I feel like everyone will experience this. But it's not just writers; it's musicians. It's anyone who wants to do anything creative. And I've realized something, as much as I don't want to admit it. Someone once said, there's a lot of famous writers out there actually who say writer's block doesn't exist. It's not real. It is real, but it's not a block per se. What I've realized, it's that it's sometimes, it's in equal parts discipline, sitting down, making sure that you sit down and put the words down. If you float around waiting for the inspiration to come and be like, I'll just write when it comes to me, it's never going to happen. You got to sit there and coax it out because it's like a muscle. But at the same time, just like you would with training, you know, it's that if you keep pummeling all the time and you never take a rest day, your muscles are going to get injured and you're just going to be like, okay, boom, I'm going to go see a physio now.
And everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And so sometimes I find that every time I've had writer's block, it will be because either there's something else going on in some other part of my life that I haven't dealt with, or maybe I'm just exhausted and I need rest, or that there's something in the story that isn't quite right. And the reason why I can't write is because, like, the next part, or I'm stuck on that edit, is because I don't know what's supposed to happen yet. And I need to give myself the headspace to figure it out.
Right.
So I'm still working on it. I mean, I literally just spent the weekend, like, battling the writer's block as well. But I think it's a combination of, like, and it's not easy. I'm still trying to learn what it is, and I probably will be figuring this out for the rest of my life. Yeah. But I think it's dancing on that tightrope between when to push yourself and say, nope, suck it up, go do it, have that discipline, and when to be kind to yourself and say, no, you need some rest.
Yes.
And you're constantly dancing between that, and that's where you'll find your greatest productivity.
I think being a boxer would really help because it's sort of like a similar experience.
The mental focus.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I keep whacking this microphone. Sorry.
Totally fine. Yeah.
And so there's this concept in psychology called flow state. And it's funny because I think a lot of people think that it's something that you only get into meditation or spirituality, and things like meditation, it can absolutely help because it puts your brain into the brainwave frequencies that help with that flow state.
Right.
But it doesn't have to be that way. Like, for example, you can find meditation and movement. When I go boxing, the whole idea is that you are 100% completely and utterly present. Like, I haven't been doing it in about a year and a half now because I've been so focused on my book and work, but I love surfing. And that's something that had always also given me that sense of absolute freedom because you can't think of anything else in that moment. You're so completely and utterly present and engaged in what you do that it's a mental release.
Yeah.
And after you've done something like that, you can get yourself into that flow state. once again?
So I have ADHD, and there's something which we call that flow state called hyperfixation or hyperfocus, where literally time flies. Your mind is just focusing on your work, and like even when because I do stand up comedy, so when I write my jokes, like it exactly like everything you just said is so true. Like, but the moment like where I think of something and I'm like, I need to jot this down, then I'm like focused on that. So it's really such a beautiful thing. I try to get it every day, but it's like almost impossible. You need to be like, everything has to be aligned before you get it.
But that's exactly it. It's like sometimes you have to wait and then, sort of, I think shaping your life in a way where when that moment comes and you're like, oh, it's here. And I feel you can pounce on it. Yeah. I know that's not always possible because there's life and responsibilities. So I think another thing is you find ways to curate the little triggers that can help put you in that state. Mm-hmm. So for example, I have like playlists that I only listen to when I'm working on my novel. I won't listen to them for anything else. Or like, I know it sounds a little bit OCD, but like I'll sit on certain chairs in certain cafes. I will never do any other kind of work in there, even if I'm like working remotely. Nope, it's almost sacred, that space for that. Okay. Because then your mind, your body, you're almost like training yourself, almost like what is that Pavlov's dog experiment?
Yes.
I am Pavlov dogging myself in that sense, to train myself that I will react to hopefully get into that flow state. So at the end of the day, it always comes down to understanding yourself better, and with all of those different aspects. I never realized how much I talk with my hands until now. So I think that's part of how I get past the blocks, or I'm trying to get there.
Yeah. I like how you said that it's a learning curve and you'll never get out of that, because the more that you do it, the more that you learn and you better yourself about it as well. So
I think with most things in life in general, like when something becomes too easy, that's when it's nice to enjoy it for a while. You don't always want to be moving the goalposts, but there will come a time where it's like, okay, I've got this down now. What's my next challenge? And that's how you grow, to always make yourself a little bit uncomfortable. Not horribly so. Not punishingly so.
True. But still
she tells me this all the time. Like there are times when I'm like, okay, this is my life now. Like what's next?
Yeah.
Then we always have to find something to keep challenging ourselves, which I really try to do every single day. It's tough though, because like, I don't know about you, but like since we're raised in Dubai, we have things like resources are available at our fingertips. So like going past that, going outside your comfort zone, your bubble, is quite hard, because like, okay, I just want to chill and take a step back, but at the same time, like we need to be seeing the bigger picture. Like, okay, what's next for my life?
But not when it becomes an addiction, right? Yes. There's like a balance where sometimes it's nice to be in that comfort zone, to like, because you need to soothe yourself in that sense, and then there are other times where we need to push ourselves. So again, I feel like everything in life comes and goes in those waves.
It's a balance.
But like for me, it's or I'm pretty sure a lot of people can also relate, but once you're in that zone, it's so hard to get out of.
It's awesome. And I think having a good support system, obviously you guys understand each other, that makes a huge difference. Like I'm very lucky in that, like my partner, he's so patient. It's one of the best things about him with that stuff, where he knows when I'm in the zone and I do my thing. And when I'm at work, so that TV show Inventing Anna?
Yes.
You know how at one point in the show she goes, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for you. And so I at
says
work
that all the time.
My deputy editor Ross and I, we had printed out these there's a meme of that. So I printed it out and like put that on the desk when I'm really busy, when I'm in the zone. So it's like, please guys, I'm in the flow. Don't interrupt me unless it's like urgent and the building's like on fire or something. We'll put that little sign up and using that meme as like, this is the red traffic light. I'm in the zone, and then you take it away.
This is the sock on the door kind of
basically,
thing. This, what it is.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love Inventing Anna.
But just to continue on that, there's this new, it's not a new thing, but it's somewhere like that has been happening for a while now. This hustler mentality where like, I need to do 500 things today. I need to sleep like 4 hours, which I feel is very toxic as well.
It is,
because you at the same time, like you'll watch this Gary V video and you're like, oh, I need to sell everything. I need to invest in this. I need to sleep 4 hours a day. I need to keep hustling and stuff. So at the same time, like even we spoke about this previously, where it's like, it's really taking its toll on people, because they think like whatever I do will never be enough.
For sure, yeah. Because then it becomes like an addiction. So there's this term that a lot of people refer to that state as now, called the cult of busyness. And it's this idea that you have to always serve, this need to be busy. And it's because it's almost, as you said, it's become a form of addiction. And it's damaging, because then we start to associate our sense of self-worth with only achieving.
100%, yes.
Right.
And again, like, I mean, I know it sounds like so like cliched, but it's this idea of constantly finding balance, because while it's good to be ambitious and to achieve, I think it's always boils down to asking yourself, why am I doing this? And let's say, for example, you know, you guys are passionate about podcasting, but you start reaching a point where maybe, you know, you become the victims of your own success and it becomes huge, and you still love it, but it's maybe becoming so demanding that it's making you forget why you love this thing. That's the point where you maybe take a pause and reflect. I'm talking about in the future when you guys become like
No,
huge
we've
famous, you know.
Yes.
no,
You know.
I would love that, but
It's
but
coming.
I know exactly what you mean, because there are days where we're like, it's in our calendar, we have to sit down and podcast, but at the same time you're like tired, we just had a long week, and we're like, you know, I don't want to do this, and at the
For the
same
sake
time
of
in the
doing
back
it.
burner, like,
Yeah.
and I'm just
Yeah.
thinking, you know, like, yeah, we need
Yeah.
to put an episode out, but
Like,
we're
you
drained.
can't,
Yeah,
like, work is work. You can't always love it every moment of every day. You know, there are moments where you just
True.
have to be like, okay, discipline, suck it up and just go. It has to be done.
Yeah.
But I think it's, yeah, that cult of busyness idea. It's the idea that if you're constantly hustling, then where's the time for rest? Like, humans have seasons and we have moments of up and down. Everything is, that's life, you
Yeah.
know? And I think that's how, it's just how we're going to burn out
Yeah.
at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, it's always like, you know, that 90s expression, check yourself or you regret yourself.
Yeah.
It's literally always comes down to
Yes.
that, right?
Yeah, but I love how there's a lot more understanding of that now, that we should try to veer away from the hustle culture, and that rest is okay. Because again, if we look years back, people are like, no, rest is for, you know, rest is for the weak. Don't rest. You have to keep pushing. But
sure.
actually, you can
More and
keep
more
pushing.
people.
Yeah.
There are some people, I think, you know, we still have some ways to go because some people still don't necessarily understand that.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I guess we also have to remember that everyone else's like sort of tolerance limit for how much they want to push themselves. Everyone's life is different, you know.
Yes.
It's going to be different for each person.
Yeah.
And even for each individual, it's going to change at different aspects of your life depending on what's happening in that phase of your life.
Yeah.
But I was also a victim of that. I literally used to live like that, where everything was so scheduled, and I would like punish myself to the point that at one point I ended up in the hospital on an IV drip, and I kept fainting, and I got really ill, and I'm like, okay, I should probably calm down or I'm going to have a stroke. And, you know, I'm so into meditation and stuff. I felt like a fraud because it's like, well, I should know better, you know,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
it's so
Yeah.
difficult to not see it when you're so like stuck in
Into
it.
it,
So
yeah.
yeah, just now I build in like the energy to ground myself every now and then. And just, I think it's also reminding myself that when you want to do all those things, even if it's for a good reason, let's say you want to help people or you want to do this awesome creative thing or whatever it is, are you being as kind to yourself as you are to others?
Yeah.
And it's remembering to always be compassionate with yourself. So like if you had a friend who had been working super hard and you can tell like they're, you know, you want to keep pushing them because they need that, at the same time every now and then you know when to tell your friends, listen, you've been working really hard, give yourself a little break.
Yeah.
Can we do that for ourselves as well?
And are you saying that to yourself too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's what I've been trying to learn how to do for the past several years, and I do feel a lot better for it.
That's good. It's difficult, but
It's like a
good.
constant
Yeah.
battle,
It's not
right?
easy. Constantly,
Yeah.
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 It's so tough.
Yeah.
Like finding that fine line, you know, between work and play and rest.
And I think that's because also from coming from the generational, I would say, background of our parents, of how they used to, like,
Yeah,
no
for
rest,
sure.
work. And from our grandparents. And now we're like, oh, rest is okay. It's different. We're trying to be one of the first generations to actually change the narrative. So we're still trying to find our ground.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're now like voicing a lot of things about like mental health and like rest days and everything. So
sure.
it's really like something that we have to constantly remind ourselves. And like
Yeah.
what you said is perfect, you know, like I will beat myself up if I don't, like, if I skip the gym for a day, and then she'll always be like, you know what, you deserve a rest. You've been going for like 5 days in a row now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
But
we can't lie to ourselves, right?
Yeah.
So it's, I mean, we literally, like my boyfriend and I, we have these conversations all the time. Oh, like there's this term nowadays, it's worth-splaining, where you try to explain it to like validate the thing, but you're trying to justify it for yourself, really.
Okay.
And the idea is like, okay, well, if it's really just an excuse, then you can feel bad about it because you can't lie to yourself and you know when you're actually just being
Yes.
lazy.
Yeah.
But when
That's
you
true.
really do need a rest, like it's okay, forgive yourself for
Yeah.
it. But therapy has also been a huge thing that's helped me with that. You know, I believe a lot in holistic coaching, and it's like if you want to eat better, you might go see a nutritionist. If you want to get in better shape, you might go see a PT. So why not the same thing for your head?
Yeah.
And it's really
Your mind,
great.
yeah.
It helps you get a third party perspective of all the things that you're going through. And I think it helps you build that level of self-awareness and work through any of the blocks that are keeping you from being more self-aware. And that's kind of the key for me for everything.
Yeah, we agree. I think, again, years ago, saying the word therapist is taboo. Like,
Yeah, like, what are you on, dude? Just get some
What's
sunlight
wrong?
and you'll be okay.
There's nothing wrong with you. Why
or
would you do
it's
that?
just you're just being lazy, or it's just excuses. It doesn't
Yeah,
exist.
yeah.
And I think we could go on the flip side where nowadays, I saw this terrifying thing where it's like this idea that on TikTok, for example, it's almost trendy to say that you have an issue, so to speak. And again, like if that is being used as something to say, okay, well, I've got this problem, so I can't do the thing, well, that's great that you have the problem, but it doesn't mean that you can use it as an excuse.
Yes.
I think it takes both sides. The world needs to be more understanding, but it's also like, for example, I always kind of think of this really simple example. I know it's not a mental health issue, but let's say you've got two kids who are the children of divorce, and one of them makes an effort to be the best partner that they could be once they've grown up and they're in a relationship with someone, and the other one is just awful. And when you ask them, why? The first one will say, because my parents divorced and I wanted to learn from it and be better. And the other one's like, well, my parents were divorced, so they damaged me. Well, if you're aware of it, then you could do something about it,
Right.
It becomes
Yes.
almost an excuse. Like, if you know that
Yes.
messed you up, then go see someone about it, go do something about it, work through your issues.
Don't let it end there.
But
and use it as an excuse.
But I think it's easier said than done. And that whole idea of like the self-awareness, I think that's why so many of us, myself included at times, like we avoid it because it's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sometimes, because part of being more self-aware means you have to look in the mirror every now and then, be like, yeah, I'm being a jerk and I need to fix this thing,
Right.
or
Yeah.
it's icky and it's uncomfortable sometimes, but sometimes we have to deal with that in order to
Yeah.
get to know ourselves better.
You
Yeah,
have
some
to
people are
get-
not ready to have that conversation with themselves, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't want to touch that subject. It's
Yeah.
quite touchy for
Even
me. And
with
I'm okay
yourself,
where I am now.
like, those thoughts, sometimes you just
Yeah.
block it out. You're like, no, I don't want to think about it. Like,
Yeah.
it's better to just sweep it under the rug. But sometimes you just have to have those conversations and those realizations with yourself.
So the mind is so weird.
Yeah.
So
It's
weird
a
in that
complex-
sense, right?
complicated.
Wonderful and complex thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, some people, for instance, who have deep trauma, they might not be ready because it's a lot. You know, you have to be in a certain time and place and energy level to be able to deal with whatever you need to unpack.
Yes.
If it's something really big, and that's okay too, But the idea that someday make a promise to yourself that when you're ready, you will face the thing.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true.
However long it might take,
Yeah.
but you kind of make those deals with yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I try to do it constantly, and I'm like, what did I promise myself the other week?
Write it
Should
down,
I
guys.
write it
Write it down and then
Yeah.
revisit it, when you're ready.
Yeah. Whenever we forget things,
Yeah.
write it down. That's the key.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back to your question
Your
earlier?
AI question.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Are you ready to answer? Do you want me to say it again?
No,
or
it's fine.
Okay.
I remember it. So it's funny because I think a lot of people in my field have been asked this a lot. And are you afraid of it? Or do you think it's great? Or do you think it's a threat? I can see how a lot of people might think of it as a threat because it's scary good.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I also had the initial like, oh God, like, what is this new thing? And it's going to take all of our jobs. But at the end of the day, I think like with most things in life, adapt or die, you have to get used to some new technology. Otherwise, it was the same thing when we went from like print publishing to digital, right?
Yes,
Everyone's like,
yeah.
oh God, what's going to happen? It's this new thing. We don't always like the change, but there's probably a pro and a con to most things in life. And in the case of like something like ChatGPT, for instance, it can help so many people. I know people who, for example, are not very good writers, and they try to use that. Like, I have a friend who'll like write something, and then they'll plug it into ChatGPT and say, write this better. So he's still written the thing, but again, it comes down to that individual because he looks at what the ChatGPT like system has done and compares it to his own and uses that to learn from it. And that
Right.
desire, it's because the intention comes from a good place, right?
Right. To better himself or herself.
Yeah. And I mean, in the beginning, I was like, oh gosh, what's this going to do to the industry, And so in terms of my day job, like you still need an editor and you still need someone who's going to fact check. And
True.
can it write with human emotion? It can learn, but it will only have the subset of information that it is open to. You still have to have a person who's teaching it. And then I think we have to think of the other level of it, which is when machines develop that intelligence, it's great, but it's all down to the people who are feeding it that intelligence.
Yes.
So it will only know or have the views of the expansive people who are feeding into that.
Yes.
So it then again can cross another dangerous territory, because then it might not be as diverse as you might hope it would be, or so I think there's just so many things to consider.
Yeah.
I feel like we're in a very early days stage of this, so we're hopefully a long way from the days of like Terminator and
Judgment
Sarah
Day
Connor
and everything.
and all those ideas. But also on the ethical side, the part that does stress me out and upsets me is that there's always going to be someone out there, or some people out there, who will want to, like, I don't know, just be jerks about it and not have ethics when it comes to certain things. Those people are always going to exist no matter what the tool is, no matter what the industry is. But now I was reading this thing on Twitter the other day about this publishing company. I think it's like a literary magazine, and they were having to like screen all these submissions with AI checkers because people are not writing it,
Okay.
And and think about, like, for example, the publishing industry. It's
Right.
such a tiny percentage of people who actually get published. That
Yes.
door is like tight enough to begin with,
Yes.
And for all of us who spend years slaving away, putting your heart and soul into a book, and like there's this great quote, I don't remember who said it, and they will say it a lot more eloquently than me, but the idea was like, if you want to become a great writer, it's simple. All you have to do is cut open a vein and bleed all over the page, and like, okay. So I mean, you put your heart and soul into it.
Yes.
And can a machine ever really produce something that is the same as that?
Yes.
But it's just, even if you forget about all of that, it's just not ethical.
Yes.
Because it's cheating. It's
Yeah.
basically cheating.
Yes.
And I think for me, I always think of it as, you remember that episode of Friends where Phoebe gets all that money by accident, and she really wants to buy a pair of boots with it.
Yeah.
And she goes, I can't, because every step I'm going to take, it's going to be like, not mine, not mine. That's how I would feel if I ever were to cheat my way to whatever it is. Because like the reward and the joy of getting that accomplishment, it's never gonna, you're denying yourself the chance to have that, and it's never gonna be the full extent of what it could be, because deep down, and again, you can't lie to yourselves,
Yes.
deep down you will know, that you cheated.
Yes.
And that little part of you, that's tiny little voice somewhere, that's gonna be like, well, if I didn't cheat, what if I never was good enough without that? I don't ever want to live with that in my own head. So
Yeah.
I want to know that whatever I did it with the strongest ethics I could, but that will depend on the individual.
Yeah.
So
But-
from
There's always a good and bad to it.
No,
Yeah.
but at the same time, like where the world is going, people will really like push people down and really sidestep their way into something, like especially
Yeah.
if there's a lot of gatekeeping. I don't know how it is in like in the world of journalism, where like, oh, you know what, you don't have that gift.
There is, yeah.
So some people, like, I don't know, like people who will really try to make their mark, they would do really quite a few things, even if it's at the cost of like
yeah.
their own ethics, like you
Yeah, I
mentioned, or if at
understand.
the cost of someone else. So
But that's the thing. I feel like the gatekeeping in that industry, it's less so about the talent, that you would replace with the ChatGPT versus like the networking, or having the right look or the right story to your background or whatever. Those are more of the barriers in the gatekeeping than if you have the talent. Then the frustration should be that you have the talent, but no one's giving you your shot. Not
Right.
like, I'm going to fight for my shot, but I
Yes.
don't want to do the work to develop my skills
Yes.
and have what it takes,
Yeah.
But on that note, it will be interesting. I think they do need to start developing a series of like laws and parameters around how the ethical side of that is going to work, because how are you going to know
Yeah.
what's fair?
Yes.
And yeah, people could be making their money off of it. But, I don't know. I think we'll just have to wait and see. So I think for writers and authors, and even for students, I think there's been a lot of comments about using it for essays and writing papers and stuff like that. One thing it can be great for is saving on time, so research. So, and
Yes.
it's like, when you think of it that way, that's where it can be brilliant, like having your little own like PA, So for example, if I'm trying to research like, I don't know, how to break down a door, or like, give me the name of every president of this country since whatever year, it can spit out the information so much more quickly if you are in a rush.
Yes.
I think part of
can
the joy
imagine.
for me is the research. I love delving into that like sort of black hole of the internet where you're on page after page, and 3 hours later you're like, I know so much random stuff about something that wasn't my first question.
Yes.
And
But
it's fun.
Can you remember when, okay, the internet was there, but it wasn't as informative as it is now, that you had to actually go to a library
Yeah.
and look for every single book that is related to the subject that you're
Yeah.
looking for?
I remember-
used to enjoy that.
Wait,
a
did
lot.
you guys ever have those Encarta encyclopedia
Oh, yeah,
discs?
yeah,
Yeah, I remember those.
I would get annoyed because like my dad, he I already told you, he's also an editor and journalist. So we had Britannica, we had like literally every book and every door-to-door salesman knew like this is the guy
He'll
you
buy
can
it.
sell anything to and he'll buy it. And there's like no place in our house. My dad subscribed to like 3 newspaper at a time. And I'm just like, there's no place in our house. There's like only books, newspapers, magazines everywhere. So it was kind of annoying at the same time, but at the same time, like, oh, if letter E, like if I want to read about elephants, I just pull out the.
Yeah.
So what does your dad think of it?
He loves it. He loves print media till date. Like I'm pretty sure like Gulf News has lost like not like Gulf News, but every newspaper basically now they're all doing that online subscription.
Mm-hmm.
So like there's still people who still come to our house. My dad would sit with them. He'll write the check. You know, like I'm
A
gonna
bit of
subscribe
tradition.
to this, yes, and
And his
everything.
thoughts on ChatGPT, or have you not asked
I've
him?
never asked him. I can ask him tonight because he's coming over here later. But
Yeah.
I can check with him.
That's your dad.
Yeah.
Yeah, being another
Yeah,
journey.
I mean, it's so new, and I think it's pretty normal for people to have that Chicken Little effect where it's something new and it seems powerful. So we're like, you know, the sky is falling, but
Yeah.
give it a little time to settle and see.
Yeah.
It's like, remember, do you guys remember the mini disc?
Yes.
Everyone was like, this thing is going to be amazing. It's going to change the world. And then
Yes.
3 years later, everyone's like, what's a mini disc? So
Yes.
you don't know if it's going to be the iPod or the mini disc. You just got to wait and
Yes.
find out. I think it's probably more likely that it's the iPod in terms of it lasting.
Yes.
To see how it evolves.
Yeah.
I'm sure our parents or our grandparents felt the same as well when something new was being introduced, like the mobile phone or at that time the telephone or the internet. And so there's always this fear about this something new, but then we find our way around it.
Yeah.
And then I guess the government also has to play a very vital part in making sure
It's used
that
properly.
it's used properly.
Yeah,
And that
same
there
like
are
when Uber
parameters
came out,
around
right?
it.
Everyone's like, no, like all the taxi companies will lose everything, and then suddenly like, okay,
We
we'll
all
live
evolve.
with it.
Yeah.
We all evolve.
Plus,
Yeah.
things have
Yeah.
a way of like coming back around in circles, right?
Yeah.
But it's funny what you just said about how, you know, things keep changing. I think that is one big thing from no matter what culture we're in. It's more of a generational thing in that in our parents' generation, these new things would come up a lot more infrequently. And now, because technology is moving at such a fast pace, I feel like, you know, again, also touching on that idea of the cult of busyness, I almost feel like our entire world is overstimulated all the time because
Oh,
there's
yeah.
something new all the time.
Yeah,
There's something
yeah,
going
yeah.
on all the time. And we need more content. And it's
Yes.
nonstop. And
Yeah.
it's been interesting because I keep seeing all these things online of like, I don't know what the trend is called, but these people who go off and like live in the wilderness because they want to go back to basics. And, you know, I feel like everything has its way of finding its natural balance, but I feel like the world is coming to a level of like peak non-stop information, new stuff all the time, and
Yeah.
it's quite unsustainable for people to be that buzzed all
yeah,
the time.
that's
Yeah.
stimulated all the time.
And
Yeah.
you know, I really actually enjoy those. Like I watched like I survived 10 days without my smartphone. And, like so
Yeah.
it's like really like people like also trying to monetize that in such a way, you
Yeah.
know, or like we're like, okay, I want to see what this is.
So many
Yeah.
people on
Hashtag modern
YouTube,
problems.
yeah, and TikTok, who are actually going, I know, living in the mountains or having their own farm, for example,
Yeah.
and living off the grid.
Like we
Yeah.
were just talking about this on our last episode. Like Janine and I have been obsessed with the show Naked and Afraid.
Okay.
So it's basically like these guys who are in the wilderness, no clothes, fending for themselves, building their own shelter and stuff. So in a way, you know, like we're still intrigued by things like that, you know, where like the caveman days where you had to hunt. Like, okay, now I'm going to use his skin for like protection, and I'm going to use his body parts for like the stew and everything. So
Animal,
it's like,
not his, because you
Yeah.
say
yeah,
his.
sorry,
Not a human,
sorry.
an
Yes.
animal.
Yeah, cannibalism not cool.
Yes.
But you know what I'm
But,
trying to say? Like,
yeah.
like things still like fascinate us in that
Yeah.
extent. You know, like if whether it be like 100 years in the future, 100 years in the past, it'd be like, whoa.
And that's the thing. I feel like if we could go back in a time machine, they'd be like, oh, wow, you guys are like aliens with all the amazing technology you have. And so I think from both sides, it's that idea of like the grass is greener.
Yeah.
You know?
So true, so true.
I mean, the things that we're able to do now, the advancements in like, you know, healthcare, medical technology, the amazing things that are possible that would not have been possible before.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean forgetting the awesome things that we used to have back in the day,
Yeah.
you know?
Which are the foundation to where we are at now.
Yeah.
Still being able to know. It's funny, actually, I used to joke with a friend, like, you know, they were like, what's your training philosophy? And I said, train like you could survive, like so that you, if the zombie apocalypse hit, you could survive it. And my fear was always that I couldn't see anything because I wore glasses and I had contacts. I've since had like an eye operation, but I'm like, see, okay, now I'm good for the apocalypse.
Yes.
Because back then it's like no matter how hard I trained my survival skills, without contacts, I'm doomed.
Or if your
Exactly.
glasses break, then you're done.
Yeah. So thank goodness for technology in that respect.
No,
Yeah,
that's very true.
Yeah, you have to talk to her about the
Yeah, I'll
eye
speak to you because
thingy.
I was
Okay.
been thinking lately about doing LASIK, so I can check
Okay.
with you on what your experiences was.
Yeah, I didn't do LASIK actually. I couldn't do it because my corneas were too thin, so it was quite high risk. But I did something called ICL surgery. It's something that they do for glaucoma patients where they cut a little hole and they basically put a permanent contact lens in your eye. So if I look into a ring light, my eyes glow like a cat's because there's a permanent lens in there.
Oh wow, okay. I
Like
didn't-
glow,
So,
as
yeah.
in there's a red.
I mean,
halo?
it's a bit shiny, reflective.
Oh.
Yeah, but it's amazing. Like honestly, after so many years of being like basically legally blind,
Yeah.
I would wake up and be like, wow, I can see my ceiling. This is amazing.
Yeah.
You know, when you take a shower when you have nothing on, you're
Yeah.
like, wait, I can't see anything.
And like even before I went to bed, I would lie awake, unable to sleep for ages because taking out my contacts and the world going fuzzy was part of my pre-bedtime ritual. And my brain was like, no, you're still awake because your contacts aren't out. I'm like,
Oh,
dude, that doesn't
wow.
matter anymore. So yeah, it took me a
Technology.
while to adjust. But
Thank
yeah.
you,
Wow.
technology.
Yeah.
Wow.
But one of the
Yeah.
biggest reasons for wanting to do that was also like just for freedom. Like so many of the sports that I love, you know, when I'd go surfing, part of my, you know, you've already battled the normal fears of like, you know, if I wipe out or I have something really awful or you get tumbled under or something. But I'm
Open
like,
water.
what if my contacts fall out and then I'm blind and I don't know which way is up or down? And you know, that was a little scary.
Yes.
So that to be able to go experience that, I remember I had gone with my friend Sean to go surfing after that, and I'm just standing there getting like bashed in the face by wave after wave. It was a long set, and I was quite close to the shore, and he was like, "What are you doing, Yi-Hwa? Get out of the way!" And I'm like, "It's fine. This is amazing because I can see it. Look at my eyes." And he must have thought I was insane, but it was
Yes.
it was an epic feeling.
Yeah, I think like you need to get it.
I need
soon
to,
as well,
definitely.
'cause
It's
he's
pretty
also
life-changing.
very blind without his
Okay.
lenses.
Yeah, the other day she wakes me up and I'm like, look at the fog, and I'm like, there is fog everywhere. Like,
I can't.
That's just the world for me.
I know.
I don't know
Are you
what
seeing
you're
it now?
talking about.
Because this is what I see every day.
You know, during that massive tsunami that was, I think, was it 2009?
In
or
Indonesia?
When was it 10, 11? In
Indonesia?
Japan.
Oh, okay.
The Fukushima one.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was in Tokyo at the time, and I remember waking up in the middle of the night. I was on the street when it happened, but the next day, you know, or like with all the aftershocks and stuff, I'd wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh God, like, where are my glasses? You know, because everything's shaking and you couldn't see. And I felt so helpless in that moment.
Oh my goodness.
It was like, I mean, you know, of course, it was nowhere near as bad in Tokyo, but
Yeah.
just it was quite intense aftershocks. And like, you know, our hotel room ceiling was shaking, and it was a good hotel, like pretty solid structure and still loads of shaking. And I just remember thinking then, I need to fix this problem someday.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
it took me about 10 years
Okay.
to get there,
That
but
was your
10
tipping
years,
point.
Yeah,
Yeah.
10 years later, I'm like, finally, I can do this.
Yes.
It's an amazing,
Yeah.
one of the best things I've ever done.
Josh, you know what to do.
Yeah.
Have I convinced you
enough.
yet?
Yes.
He's very
For sure.
convinced now. It's like soon enough.
Yeah.
Just maybe before we like wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to touch upon maybe your novel.
Okay.
If you could give us a couple of like
Yeah,
teasers.
we never
of
asked what your
Oh,
book is
yeah,
about,
sure.
actually.
What it is
I know, that's a lot
about.
Yeah.
that I do.
Yeah.
So with my book, okay, so my first book, the one that I had won the fellowship with, I used to call it a science fiction. I've realized it's a little bit more speculative fiction with science fiction elements. It started as a YA, a young adult,
Okay.
and then it veered off into it's so dark, maybe it is an adult, and then now it's back to YA because if The Hunger Games is classified as YA, then
Yes.
this can be. Nothing
Okay.
is quite
Yeah.
as dark as that. But yeah, so it's. I don't know. I should have memorized my log line, which is like your one-line elevator pitch, but it's I haven't memorized it. I'm ashamed to say, but it's about an orphaned teenager. When I say teenager, though, she's like 17, 18 years old. So that tipping point between when you're not a child anymore, but you're not quite an adult yet.
Right.
Basically, her father had recently died, and so she was very recently orphaned because her mom had been dead since she was a baby. And he had been a crazy conspiracy theorist, and so she's living with a lot of shame around that because in this world, there's no money as the currency. The currency is positive energy credits.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's almost like a world of toxic positivity because you're not allowed to say anything bad or anything like you said
Okay,
negative.
okay.
You get taxed for it. and she's desperate to start a new life, and she's never really belonged anywhere.
Yeah.
And then so she finds a way to get into the big city and gets invited to join this organization, which is supposed to help heal her. And when she gets there, she uncovers a lot of twists. I don't know if I want to say the ending, but spoiler alert, like, you know, what did her father really kill himself, or was he murdered? Who did it and why? And so that's what the story is mostly about.
Where can we find your book?
Well, if I sign an agent this year, then maybe by 2025 or 2026, it'll take a little while.
Yeah.
So the journey of writing the book, obviously it's quite difficult doing it with a full-time job, you know, especially when I write for a living and I edit for a living as well. So it's just like words everywhere. So I get up a couple of hours before work. I'll write from 6 till 8, start work at 8 every weekend. Like I said, luckily my boyfriend's really patient about this. My friends are really understanding. Like my best friend, Kerry, she is a champion with saying, like, you know, I'm not going to see you this weekend. You go work on your book, because she believes in me, and I'm so grateful for that. But yeah, it's a lot of it is discipline. Like even when I'm tired, I'm not in the mood, but you have to go and do it.
Yes.
And you love it, but it can, you know, like we were saying about that balance. So it takes a while to write the book. Once you finish, then you have to edit. Like you should never send your first draft. So I think I've rewritten this thing about, like, I don't even know how many times, like 30 something times, God knows. And then you start pitching to agents. And then once you've signed an agent, which can take quite a long time as well, it's a pretty difficult process, then your agent will then work with you on further edits if they feel that it needs more, most likely yes. And then they will sell it out or pitch it out to publishers. Then once they've sold it to a publisher and you get a book deal, then your editor from the publishing company will have more edits for you, which you'll work on. And then comes like the cover and, you know, the marketing plan and all that stuff.
Printing and all that.
So book releases, like it's a slow process. And I firmly believe that you have to really want it to stay in it, because it's not easy. And you have to have a thick skin, because rejections are just part of the process, you know, and there'll be days where you look at it and you're like, okay, I really like this. I'm super proud of this. And the next, you know, week you look at it and you're like, what am I doing? This 20,000 words is pure garbage. I'm like wasting my life. Like, oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. And
it's a roller coaster of emotions.
Completely, yeah. But
so is it finished, the book, or almost?
Yeah.
Or?
So I finished when I call it first draft, it was like 17th draft, but like first official, you know, draft that I would allow anyone else to see. And that was finished in like, I think it was June last year. And as part of the fellowship, I had a mentor, and so he was very kind to have read it and given me some feedback. And then I went to New York with the Lit Foundation in October last year. And after that trip, I decided to rewrite the entire thing in the first person, because my character is an introvert. And there were reasons for it to be in the third person when I started, which was there were scenes that she couldn't have known about. Took those scenes out. So I wanted to get in more inside her head. So that's taken me a number of months as well.
I can imagine rewriting a whole book from
and because it changes a lot, you know, more than just like the tenses and stuff. It's also, you know, and it's also changing the perspective. And so now I'm kind of in what I'm hoping is my final set of edits before I start querying to agents. So let's see. And if the agents all come back with no's for the same reason, I will have to look at what that reason is and see if more edits will need to be made. Hopefully someone will love it. Fingers crossed. But yeah, while I was waiting for some feedback on that first novel, because you also need to take a break from it sometimes to get some perspective, that's when I started working on my second novel, because it's kind of like going to the gym, where if you know, and you know, I'm like super into training and, you know, sports and stuff. And so if you stop going to the gym, it's fine to take a little break, you know, for a couple of weeks here and there. But if you stop for like 4 months, it is so much harder to get started into that routine than if you had just slowed it down.
Correct.
So just to keep that mojo going, I started writing my second one, which is a fantasy. So yeah, that one, again, like quite speculative fiction-y with a bit of a dark story, but it's set in a fictional version of Taiwan. And when I say fictional, it's because I don't want any of the politics involved. Like the history of the country is like, you know, who does it belong to, the Aborigines? Is it about China? Like it's just about that it's a beautiful island, which is funnily enough one of the old names Formosa means. And it just takes place in this beautiful area. And so we meet this main character, and she is drinking this potion and about to walk through this forest. And we're like, is she going to die? Because she's basically saying goodbye. And then she comes out on the other. She's 30 years old. And when it opens, she's describing herself as this like hideously super old, wrinkled. And you realize, oh, she's only 30. And when she comes out on the other side of this forest walk, she's 16 years old. And all of her memories have been wiped from the past 14 years. And so she's part of this secret community of people that live in this mountain gorge. The geography's all messed up because I've put like this lake from one side of the country next to the gorge. It's a completely fictional version of it.
Yeah.
And this group of people, they've been apparently like blessed or cursed, depending on how you look at it, by this mythology of a dragon many years ago. And basically they're semi-immortal. So every time they reach the age of 30, they're reborn at 16.
Wow.
And so it's the gift of eternal life and eternal youth. But the price that they pay is that they lose their memories. So every time they're reborn, they're at the 16 again, without everything that they remembered.
Wow.
And the elders in this community, they remain the same age. They keep all of their knowledge. And they're almost treated like gods because they have all the knowledge of history.
Does it get wiped out?
Yeah, exactly. And so they are in control of this group, and they're too innocent to realize because their memories keep getting wiped. And there is a whole world outside, like a modern city, you know, because it's very ancient, you know, as we see, they keep a lot of old customs. They have a bit of new technology here and there that the elders bring back. They're the only ones who are allowed to go to the big city. And then you realize it's actually like in 1995 or 97 or something. And there's a whole modern world out there. But all the community are told you're not allowed to leave because, you know, the horrible modern people will study you like lab rats. And then our main character, they're not allowed, they're banned from leaving any written records for themselves. And so she finds a series of old diaries that the previous versions of her had written and hidden and leave clues for herself every time.
Wow.
And so when she finds them, she realizes there are great love stories and stories of adventures, and she craves all of that. And so the previous her encourages her to go beyond.
Nice.
And then she uncovers a whole world of dark secrets that people have been hiding.
I would love to read that book.
Me
it's
too.
So
I love it.
that was the one that won the Lit Fest prize this year.
Okay.
With that one, I'm not 100% finished with the manuscript yet, so I'm working on that. And then I'll get some feedback as part of my prize win.
Yeah.
And then the long process of editing for that begins.
Wow.
Well, thank you for letting us know. Like, who would have thought that such an elaborate process goes into
Pleasure.
publishing a
Thank you
book,
for listening.
right? It's not just, I wrote my book, I want to print it out, and it goes out to...
Yeah, then I'll put it on Amazon or whatever, and then just
I
sell
mean,
it out.
self-publishing is definitely an option as well, you know, but there are pros and cons to each one. And I think originally, I don't want to say like, I didn't have the confidence to go for traditional publishing because I didn't think I was good enough because it's such a difficult industry to get into. But saying that implies that I think that self-publishing is not as good, which is also not the case. It's just that there are so many people out there who self-publish without that like level of vetting. Now, on the one hand, it's that credibility. But at the same time, that approval, so to speak, that you get from traditional publishing, it's also a very gate-kept industry. So it's all like shades of gray,
it's like
you
a
know?
cutthroat industry.
So you just choose what's best for you and then try to...
Exactly, yeah. And I think for
it.
me, it ultimately came down to the idea of I had this, as cheesy as it sounds, I always had a dream of being someone who could be traditionally published. So it's part of honoring that dream.
Yeah.
And it's also because self-publishing, it's a lot of work, you know? I mean, you can make more money from each sale because obviously, you know, you don't have to go through
the middleman and everything.
Yeah, exactly. So the percentage of money you can make from it, but you have to do all the work with the marketing and the branding. And it's, if you're good at that and you're willing to put in the time and the energy, be great. But I also have a full-time job.
Yes.
You know, and I just want to keep writing more books. I would rather keep writing more books and do that. And I have this dream of doing that. Also, there are some self-published books. Look, and obviously, you don't write a book with the goal of like movie deals in mind because the percentage, again, is tiny. And if that's the reason why you're writing, then you should try and write a movie script, not a book instead. Right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, nowadays, it's pretty normal for a lot of authors. Like if you do have commercial viability with that, people need content nowadays. So that is great, you know, especially if you're writing a high concept novel, which would lend itself well to that medium. And so there are a few breakthroughs, like, for example, The Martian. You know, it was a self-published book.
Oh, wow.
But it was a self-published book. And then, you know, go ahead and here's a movie with Matt Damon.
Yeah.
But, you know, I think you have a better chance of standing out. Like, I'm not saying standing out. It's also really difficult to stand out. But you have a better chance of navigating that when you have a literary agent or a publisher to help you get those deals.
Someone who's done it before.
Yeah.
Who knows
they can
the
help to
roots
open those
and
doors.
everything.
Yeah. Because also there are a lot of agencies and studios that won't consider it from a self-published person.
Right.
But who knows? I mean, even on TikTok with Book Talk, there are books that people will go wild over. It's such an unpredictable industry because you never know what's going to make people go wild.
Yeah.
So I think if anything I've learned and heard loads of advice on, which I firmly believe in, if you try and write to something that's going to be a trend, you will never it will never be what you want it to be, whether that's a success or reward, because you got to write it for you. Write
Yes.
the story that you really want to tell.
Yes.
And let the rest of the chips fall where they may, because even if it doesn't succeed on paper the way you want it to, you wrote the story and you can be proud of that.
Yes. And it's your
So-
book. It's not like
so,
you're
yeah.
writing it for any other agenda
Yeah.
other than writing your own book.
Yeah.
It's
So,
just amazing.
let's
You've
see
done
how it
two.
goes.
I mean,
Thanks. Well, work in progress.
yes, it's going to be a lot of work for sure, but you've
Yeah.
already started the work and you've already won awards for it. So
Thank you.
congratulations.
Yeah, so you're on the
on
right
that.
path. So
Yeah. Fingers crossed. Well,
We
I'm
can't wait for it to get out.
Yeah.
So that
planning
we
to
can
go on
read
a
it.
writing retreat. There are a couple of them around the world where you basically go to a quiet place and then you just spend like, a few days or a week writing. So I'm really excited to do a couple of those because I've heard they're pretty magical to get the flow state going.
okay.
Yeah.
I'll join you
Yeah.
because I need to write more jokes. And
Right.
Right?
Comedy.
Nice. Any kind of
skits.
writing.
Yeah.
If I find any good ones, I'll let you know.
Yeah. Exactly.
cool.
Well, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
That's amazing. Like we've
Yeah, thank you for
really
sharing your
never
story.
heard of how the whole writing process goes, so it's
Thank you
very
for your
educational
interest.
for us as well. We can't wait to read your book somewhere
Thank you,
down the
guys.
line in the future, and we wish you all the best.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
So, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you, or like
If they want
I
to
don't know
stalk
if
you,
you-
or
yeah.
if you have any.
your
Well,
website or something like
Yeah,
that? or-
I mean, I'm on Instagram. There's no particular reason why it's private. It's just, I mean, I accept most requests as long as it doesn't look like a bot or something.
Yes.
My name is pretty hard to spell, so it's YIHWAHANNA. I do still teach boxing classes at the moment, but starting in April, I'm going to be taking a sabbatical for several months to focus on the books, but I'll be back there eventually.
Yes.
I've got a website. It's just my name, Yi-Hwa.com. It's not that exciting. It's just about me and my career. But one of the things I'm hoping to add maybe by the end of this year when I get a little time is because I record meditations sometimes, I'm hoping to add a new section to my website with some soundscapes and share some of the resources that I listen to and
Okay.
use while I'm writing. So
Perfect.
eventually
Amazing.
it'll get there when I get the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it can also help other aspiring writers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fingers
Yeah.
crossed.
So now what we're gonna do is maybe in a year from now we'll have you back on,
Oh,
and we'll
thank you
see where your
guys.
progress has been.
Yes.
So
Okay,
it's
well,
like it's good to keep you like accountable,
Ho-
basically.
hopefully,
Yes. Yeah.
right. No, I love that.
Yeah.
Well,
That'll
hopefully
be
I'll have
nice.
some exciting things to say.
You will. You will. Yes. Well, thank you so much. We're going to put all
Thank
of
you,
that
guys.
in the description of this podcast
Yes.
and the video. Thank you so much, Yi-Hwa, for
Yeah,
being
Thank you for
being
inviting
here.
Thank
me.
you
It's
for
been
your
wonderful.
time.
Our
Yeah.
pleasure.
And thank you, Max, for giving the good vibes.
Yes.
He's
Completely passed out on the couch.
exactly. He's on.
He's like, what's happening?
Yeah, and now he's a little bit awake. He's coming back to reality. Yes, Max, we're here. Well, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
guys.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.